It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders Podcast.
Here we go.
Here's Jim Meehan and Richard Fox.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Good Monday morning as well. Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. Richard Fox, Jim Meehan with you for 40 minutes or so. And it was a tough, long week for the Zags. An 0-2 week. That hadn't happened in conference for a long time. I want to say San Diego and BYU a decade ago or more, maybe 11 years. The Zags, the poll isn't out, but the Zags were 16th, and with 2 losses, I'm not sure they will still be in that top 25. In the net rankings, the Zags dropped to 18th, I believe, and that's with a 2-5 quad 1 and a 2-1 quad 2 record. So 4-6 in those 2 levels, 10-0 in the rest. And then in KenPom, they're down to 13th or 14th, and I believe that 14th. I'm sorry, and that's I believe a season low. They're 6th on offensive efficiency, 60th on defensive efficiency. That's dropped quite a bit. In the bracket projections, the Zags have slid all the way to a 9 in Jerry Palm's latest bracket. And St. Mary's, I believe, is a 9 as well. Foxy, this has kind of got the feel of the opposite of last year when they really had some bumpy road in November and December and then got it together in the conference. This year they were rolling early and now have kind of slipped off the rails here. December and January have been pretty tough. So, they came on those last 2 months a year ago. We'll see if they can pull that off in the next 2 months here. How much damage have the Zags done in terms of being on the bubble or close to it in your eyes?
I don't have like a pronounced concern about them being on the bubble. I mean, I think, they're going to have more opportunities to improve that quad 1, quad 2 record, given that the league is better than it has been. And I don't subscribe to the idea that, the floor is, fallen out and that this group can't find a way to win some of those games. But I certainly think they're at a point right now in their season where that's not even like on the radar as far as what you should be thinking about. So
yeah, that's what we think about, not that.
Right? Yeah, and that's just they've got a week here before Portland on Saturday. I remember these types of weeks as a player. They were long. And they were difficult and not a lot of fun. And by the time you get to Saturday, you really want to take it out on somebody else because you've got a week of taking it out on each other. I would imagine it's going to be a very, very challenging week for this group. Mark is certainly frustrated, particularly on the defensive end. And I think just with maybe just broadly, not necessarily each and every guy, but just broadly speaking, I think he wants to see some more toughness and some more competitiveness on that end of the floor. So that's really the focus. I think that for this group is right now we've got to get better. I mean, to your point, and what you're implying is they're going the wrong way. Last year it was a slow start, some struggles, and then they started to figure it out. And there were questions as to whether or not they could. That is not the story this year. They started off awfully well. And even in some of these tough losses in the non-conference, you felt like they're right there with Kentucky. They're right there with Connecticut. It feels like they're going the other way right now, where there's just questions about their ability to not only be a good team, but win a close game. So that who cares right now where they're going to fall on the seed line, on the bubble, off the bubble, that all that stuff doesn't really matter. I think for this group, there's more kind of entrenched concerns I think they need to fight through.
No, you're on it. They, as I mentioned, as tough a week as they've had in a long time. Now they did lose back to Kentucky and UConn. but especially the Kentucky game, I think is going to be one that they kick themselves over with that huge second half lead, not able to execute down the stretch and lose in overtime. That was the last time they lost 2 in a row. So that's twice in one season. Doesn't happen around Gonzaga. Happened this time. Giving up 100 to a WCC opponent doesn't happen. It hadn't happened under Mark Few. First opponent, non-conference or conference, to get 100 points on the Zags in the McCarthy. So, but I would, kind of on the same topic, I would say they've been in so many of these spots. People forget that, they're not gifted a spot in the bracket every year. It just feels like it sometimes because they're competing for a 1 seed or a top seed or playing in the Northwest somewhere. But last year, a little more grim of a situation, I would say. 2016, not too far removed from that. That team was an 11 seed and I believe won the tournament, the WCC, to get in. So that tells you they weren't getting in. And then other years along the way, I think they had a 9-loss season in there. As a watcher over the years, I don't recall Mark Few ever losing a team. You do see that. You see teams that are good squads and they hit some adversity or injury and they never quite respond. But for the most part, I think Mark's teams have always, either hit the ceiling of what they could do or got in the neighborhood, got pretty close. So my take is they're pretty good with their back against the wall. We'll see if they can do it again. Where's your panic meter at, Foxy? Are you red line? Are you in the middle? Are you still kind of on the low end?
I would say I'm right there in the middle, if that makes sense.
There's enough to be worried about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm with you. I until I see it, I've got a lot of confidence until I see that they can't find a way to kind of get over this kind of rough stretch. I've got a lot of faith that Mark and that staff are going to be able to do that. The year that comes to mind to me most often when we've seen Gonzaga have a difficult stretch, last year and this year being of most note, is that year with Sabonis and Wiltshire when they effectively had to win out and they had to win the WCC tournament game to get in the tournament. I think we all felt like that was a team that was likely to not make it. And then, of course, they got in there and go down to Denver, win a couple games, and probably should have beaten Syracuse to go to the Elite Eight. And that team, of all the teams that I can remember, probably had the most reason to just pack it in for the year. I mean, they were really struggling. That talent level on that team that year was not all that high, other than Wiltshire and Sabonis, and they found a way. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think for me, Jim, the concern I have is, and it's everyone's asking me, what's going on, and we're going to talk about it today. And it's not as if there's like one thing or a clear thing that you can point to and say that's what's going on. I mean, you look at their numbers, they're in these games, their offense is where it wants to be. Certainly the defense, we'll talk about that, has not been where they want it to be, but they've got good players. They've got a great coach. They're not getting blown out by anybody. I mean, they're competitive. I mean, they fought to the end against Santa Clara. That last group was remarkable with how they continue to fight. But it's something that it's hard. I'm not sure we could put our finger on it. But when I look at this group sometimes, and I think I've talked about this before, you don't get a sense that there's a lot of joy. Like there's just the vibe that when you watch them play, they play hard. They're very competitive, but it doesn't feel like a group that's having fun. Like, it's just heavy all the time. It just feels very much like a grind, very, kind of almost professional. Like, this is my job. I'm going to go do my job. This is the scout. We're going to execute as best we can. Um, but really, other than Ben, who I think his energy kind of he exudes this energy, and I think there's some level of it's somewhat contagious with everybody else. Everybody else, it feels as if they're very much in their own space, and they're doing their job or trying to do their job, but it doesn't like permutate out at all. And again, I can't quantify that, but
No.
I mean, I watched Santa Clara play, and there's a camaraderie and like a joy, that they play with that just I don't see that necessarily with Gonzaga. Same, even WSU. I wasn't down at Oregon State, but WSU, that there was a connectivity with that group. Um, and so it may be nothing. It may just be my perception, and it's the lens in which I'm looking at this team's struggles. But they got to get back, I think, a little bit of that. At the end of the day, this is about playing, and it's supposed to be fun. And so you go into these games with that joy. And I know that sounds a little bit, touchy-feely and not necessarily something that um, as a fan, you're all that interested in. You're just like find a way to win a close game.
Yeah,
But
play
I
better.
think,
Yeah.
but I think as a player, I mean, that's kind of where it should start. And so yeah, I'm going a little bit long here on this particular topic, but that's something I'm looking for with this group is that noticeable to me anyway?
Yeah. Well, we'll see if they can summon that among other things that they need to hit too. And one thing that's going to make it a bigger challenge for Wazoo or for Gonzaga, and I'm going to say St. Mary's, even at the top now with a 1-game lead, and all those teams in the top 6-ish, maybe 7, with LMU now beating some people. Oregon State and Washington State have really impacted the standings, and they're going to continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're both
Mm-hmm.
good enough to beat anybody. Oregon State got the Zags on Thursday. We'll talk about that in a second. Wazoo has beaten some folks too. I think they're going to probably get St. Mary's. One or both will get them maybe once in conference. And of course, the Zags haven't played St. Mary's, so there's a lot of there's a lot of game left. And in terms of the conference season, we're late in the first half. We're not even to the halfway point. So we'll keep an eye on that. Oregon State, to me, was like watching a lot of the Zags' close losses back in December. That was a fun game, entertaining game, back and forth, high-level offensive ability. I'm sure a lot of people look at it. Yeah, what about the defense? Because it was high level. It was high level offensive for both teams. Zags had a 6-point lead in the second half. I think 5 with under 6 to go, and then the offense dried up again. Defense couldn't get the stops, and I felt like they were a bit fortunate. Well, they were clutch, but they were also a bit fortunate to get threes. Ben Gregg and Graham Ike. I think that's just the 8th 3 for Graham, although he's shooting very well. I think he's over 40% from deep. But when those two hit those shots and it went to overtime, all I was thinking was, like the West Virginia game where the Zags had a 5-point lead and West Virginia made it up in that last 30 seconds. This time Gonzaga had all the momentum, was going into overtime with that on their side, and it turned out just the opposite. What'd you make of that closing stretch, both sides of the ball, that eventually cost Gonzaga a win there?
Well, and I want to say with just under 4, the game was tied in overtime. Look, you go 1 of 8 from the field in overtime. Oregon State got to the line a ton in that game, and certainly made their free throws in overtime. But you go 0-4 from the 3-point line. And I remember Battle had a possession where he was trying to draw a foul, didn't get it. At a key moment. I think he does that sometimes. He's driving to get fouled versus driving to score. You're not going to get that call on the road. You're just not. So it's, that was a really physical game. And you get into overtime. I agree with you. I thought they had momentum, but for whatever reason, Jim, I mean, the execution isn't what it needs to be. They miss shots, and then you compound it with defensively. Um, they just couldn't keep anybody in front, and we kind of saw that against WSU too. They found a way to
And
win that
Santa Clara.
game.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, yeah, certainly Santa Clara too. Um, and just time and time again, Oregon State their guards could get where they wanted to go, and there has to be a point where you as an individual player you take it personally and you just find a way to keep a guy in front. Maybe not every time, but it just felt like it was a turntable. And when you can get 2 feet in the paint as a driver, I'm either looking to finish or I've forced Gonzaga to help, and now I can kick it out to shooters. And so Oregon State got a lot of good looks. And then to Mark's point after the game, I think he made a comment of this. Even when they did a good job contesting, Oregon State made some really difficult shots. And Rataj, that three at the top when he banked it in. We saw that again. Santa Clara, was it Stewart banked in a three on that stretch, right? I mean, so certainly I think if you're Gonzaga, you look at both those games and feel like you had some bad luck, some defensive bad luck. But when you let guys get in a rhythm, all of a sudden the basket feels bigger. I've got more confidence. I'm in a rhythm, and now making some of those tough shots is just easier. So
you're right.
Yeah, it's just the combination of not being able to execute down the stretch. And it's been a theme this year. It's every game, and we've said this before. Every game there's a story to each game where you can justify it, or you can rationalize, or you can explain. Well, look, that was tough shot by Rataj, kind of a backbreaker. Didn't get a call here. Ball doesn't bounce your way. But now we've got a collection of games where there's just an underlying inability to finish. And again, I'm struggling to pinpoint what that reason is, but certainly it exists. It's there. They've got to find a way to win these games. And we talked about it, I think, a couple of weeks ago. The concern after the non-conference was, are you going to have how many opportunities are you going to have to be in these tight games to work through those issues and find a way to win close games so that you have more confidence, or you and I have more confidence as they get into March. Well, they've certainly had opportunities, and they continue to miss them. Yeah. They continue, to not find a way to finish.
Yeah, those 2 quad one wins came in the first 10, 12 days of the season.
Right, but Baylor's not who we thought they were.
No,
that Arizona State game felt like that might be a sneaky good win. I mean, they're like 1-5 in the Big 12.
Yeah,
exactly. So I mean,
San Diego State lost again the other night. Saturday night. They've got at least 3 conference losses. So.
Indiana's solid, but not. They're not nearly as good as we thought. I mean, I remember saying I thought that they were better than Baylor. That was going to be a really good test. And but on the flip side, Jim, they're going to have more opportunities in close games, because you look at Oregon State, you look at WSU, they still, they have to go down to the Pullman. Oregon State's coming up next week. They got to go down to Santa Clara. I mean, San Francisco just beat Oregon State. Oregon State can't win on the road in this league, apparently. All 3 of their losses are on the road, LMU, Santa Clara, and San Francisco. And obviously St. Mary's has had the league certainly gave them a nice soft start to the schedule. They haven't really gotten to the meat of their conference slate, but St. Mary's is going to be difficult too. So they're going to have more opportunities, is my point. Yeah. But it's certainly disappointing, and Oregon State is the most recent, I think, where you just, to your point, you've got the momentum going into half. Ike gets 2 fouls, he's out. You can't make a 3. You get good looks. It's just frustrating. Frustrating. Three turnovers in overtime.
Yeah.
3 turnovers.
No, it was they did not. I wrote about it in the follow-up. I want to say they made 3 out of their last 15 shots, something like that. And 2 of them were Benny and Graham hitting those threes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was not their finest moment on late game execution, an ongoing problem. And I think I'm sure we mentioned this, or I think I said it, that after watching the exhibition game, 96-93 to USC down in the desert, I'm pretty sure we both kind of came to the same conclusion that offensively they're going to be fine, and defensively, how that side of the ball goes is how far this team will go. I think that applies more than ever, but you got to add the other one too. Until they get late game execution ironed out and win some of these tight games, there's going to be a big hurdle to what they can accomplish. So time to fix it. We'll see if they do. Let's move on to Santa Clara. And, that's as poor a defensive half, I just say it, that I've seen them have in recent memory. They gave up 50 to Pepperdine in the second half. They gave up 59 to Santa Clara, who had scored 54 total in their game before, but also had 56 against USF in the second half and won that game going away. I'm getting stopped by ushers to ask about the 100-point mark. I had another a fan came up and asked me how many threes Tyree Bryan hit and how many of the team hit. I had another usher ask me that. I was just walking to the interview room. I mean, if I'd have been just sitting there, I think I'd have probably had a deluge. You probably get it on your phone and fans as well. They just were unable to slow down Tyree Bryan, and to some degree, I mean, his numbers were fine. He was mid-30s, upper 30s from the 3 on the season. But, man, he just torched him. Adama Ball, huge.
20, all 20 in the second half, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was all second half. Tilly kind of canceled out Ike. Neither one of them really stopped each other. And I think their point totals were very similar. Mark Few said he went through the team's defensive playbook. And I did see those.
They zoned for a bit.
Three-quarter court press. I saw man. I saw switches on their zone, on their coverages on screens. I saw a newer one, a half court, like a trap almost, when they had Michael out front. They went zone like most of them, and Mark thought this as well. It worked for a series, and the next series, nothing. So I think they did try a bunch of things. They finally found a unit at the end there that was really interesting. No Braden, no Graham. It was Benny, Michael, Stromer, Hickman, and Nemhard, kind of the speeded up squad, and they certainly did that. But nothing seemed to work with their base defenses. Did you kind of feel that they exhausted everything in their book at that point, and it was just going to be one of those nights where Santa Clara hit everything they put up?
Yes and yes. I mean, they zone more than I can remember. They'd stay in the zone. A couple possessions, it looked like they started zone and then broke into man-to-man, kind of a matchup zone. And then certainly Santa Clara is having an out-of-body experience. I'm not sure. I'm sure Senek's been in it long enough, but if you had the chance to ask him, is that the best is that the best shooting performance you've ever had from a team? And if it isn't, where does it rank? It's top 5. I mean, but the thing about it, Jim, is there was no point in the game where Santa Clara was uncomfortable, rushed, sped up.
Maybe only the last minute or two when it got tight.
Fair enough.
That's about it.
Fair enough. But you can't play 40 minutes of basketball that desperate defensively.
Yeah.
And it was a very physical press. That's a good point. Yes. But during the stretch where you lost the game or lost your grip on the game, they just were comfortable. It's really impressive to watch them play. They move the ball and they do it a lot like WSU, which is they attack the paint with the drive, force you to collapse, and then they kick it out to shooters. And it just felt like all night long Gonzaga was on skates. They just, they were always chasing the ball. They were just running around trying to keep up with it. And I couldn't have been more impressed with the composure Santa Clara had, particularly in the second half. Over and over again in late clock situations, they didn't panic and they continued moving the ball. And it led to good looks.
Hell yeah.
Certainly, Brian hit a couple tough ones. I remember a ball late clock on the left wing. Nemhard was there, but he's 6'5", 6'7". Nemhard's 6 foot. He just rises over him and knocks down a beautiful three as the buzzer goes off. Maggie had one where I think he caught it with 4 seconds on the left side. Pump fake, Gonzaga defender flies by, drives it to the free throw line, forces the collapse off of Brian, kicks it over to him. I think Hickman's trying to come up from the corner. He can't get there in time. I mean, it's just over and over again. They just didn't panic in these late clock situations. Just a really impressive performance. I think they started the half 8 of 8 from the 3-point line. And again, a lot of these are just comfortable, in rhythm, catch and shoot jump shots. They weren't having to take these shots off the bounce. They just spread Gonzaga out, and that dribble penetration just was a problem all night long.
Yeah.
And then Ball was 0 of 4 in the first half, had 20 in the second half, 7 of 10, and he was enormous. You just, and these big wings are give Gonzaga problems. I know you made a comment of that in the notes for us today, but at no point has it not felt like Gonzaga is imposing themselves on teams defensively at all right now, and certainly not to the level we saw towards the first half part of the season. I mean, I remember feeling and saying that I thought this team had a chance to be elite on that end of the floor. They are miles away from that right now. I mean, since that WSU game, it just feels like these teams are comfortable. There's no physical. They're not imposing themselves physically on teams, in my opinion, defensively. Gonzaga can play with anybody physically, right? But there's a difference between initiating that, being the cause of that, versus reacting to it. And they just don't impose themselves. Over and over again, I just couldn't get over how comfortable the Broncos were with the ball. It was a master class, I thought, in ball movement, execution, poise, and then you couple that with the fact that they were shooting the ball out of their mind, and it's just it's just a recipe for a loss, and and all that being said, you're outscored by 24 from the 3-point line, and you got a chance to win it at the end. I think that this says a lot about this team. I mean, there's not any quit. That last group certainly left it all out there. I mean, Ajayi and Greg were legitimately gassed, though. I mean, by the end, I mean they were just done.
Yeah.
So it's
a head scratcher, man.
It's hard.
It is.
You put up 99 points and you lose.
It kind of in the simplest basic terms, basketball, a lot of ways comes down to taking care of the ball. It's like football. You got to take care of the ball. But who's getting the best shots? Who's getting the easiest buckets, the best shots, quality looks every time down? And the Zags are doing that for the most part offensively like clockwork all year. But so is the other team.
Well, yeah, but the difference is, yes, you are right. Gonzaga still takes care of the ball, but teams, the last 2 games, because of Gonzaga's issues defensively, Oregon State and Santa Clara have been able to take advantage of Gonzaga's turnovers in a way Gonzaga's been unable to take advantage of their opponent's turnovers.
Exactly. Because Oregon State is a very slow tempo team.
Yeah.
Every time they turned it over, it ended up at the other end scoring.
Yeah, Gonzaga took 19 more shots than Oregon State, but Oregon State had a plus 11 advantage off of turnovers. They had 19 points off of Gonzaga turnovers.
Yeah.
Santa Clara plays at a faster pace, +6 off turnovers. So, I mean, you're Gonzaga, you only turn it over 10 times. Santa Clara turns it over 14 times, yet Santa Clara's got a +6 point advantage. That's just, it's if you can't guard anybody, yes, I may turn it over less, but it's more painful for me because teams are taking advantage of that in a way that we're not.
No, and you saw Santa Clara had a big that could score it on his own.
Feels good.
You had a big, and you had two bigs with Oregon State. Ratai and Parsifala had a very nice night. I think he fouled out, but he scored it pretty well in there too. And Ratai, a little bit of everything: the foul line, in the block,
Knocked
off
down a
of
couple
bounds,
threes,
banking in a three here and there. That's circus layup. I've seen. I don't know how he made that, but he made it. So you're seeing the inside presence of Oregon State, Santa Clara, maybe what Wazoo didn't have in that game. It was good offensive teams that really got going against the Zags. And now the week ahead here is just one game, Portland, which the Zags handled back in the arena here, 2-3 weeks ago. Start of the month, yeah. And I felt like it might have been Gonzaga's best defensive half of the season. That first half, I think Portland was in single digits until the final 4 or 5 minutes of that half. So you got a week to prepare. We know what Portland has. They have the big kid, the 6'10" freshman Rapp. That's a very nice player. They do have some size. They start a lot of size with Dengdit and some of their other personnel. But to me, this is going to come down to exactly what you mentioned at the outset: is how do the Zags respond to Hell Week coming this week in practice? It's going to be, I'm imagining, very physical and very, stop, point out this mistake, stop, point out this, rotation, whatever. I think they're in for a long, tough physical week. And I think it's all going to come down to how they respond attitude-wise and fix-wise, adjustment-wise, defensively. Because Portland has some ability to score it. You saw it in the second half for a little while till the Zags put them away at the arena. I think it's 90. A lot of games are like this, but I think it's 90% on Gonzaga. What's going to be your response? How do you come out and show it on Saturday? What do you think?
They should put a whooping on Portland. I mean, that's what you need to see. You need to see Gonzaga put a number on the Pilots. Look, Portland's got a couple pieces, sure, but they don't have a guy on that team that'd be on. I think Gonzaga would recruit. I mean, they're 1-6 in the conference. So one win is against Pacific, I believe, at home. If that is in any way a game, or Gonzaga in any way looks uninspired, then I do. My alarm meter goes way up.
Yeah.
You've got a week here to get yourself right. Right. I mean, the first couple of days of this week are going to suck, and then all of a sudden Wednesday, it's going to be, less about all the mistakes we made and how bad we played and these losses and all that stuff. And now it's about moving forward. And as you get to Thursday, Friday, now it's about Portland and it's about moving, if that game in any way is a struggle, or, it looks like a flat Gonzaga team, then there's something going on. Portland's not a good basketball team. I think that we're okay to say that. They've got some nice young pieces. They're big, sure, but they're not anywhere on Gonzaga's playing. So Gonzaga needs to look like that on Saturday, in my opinion.
After the game on Saturday, and even the one in Corvallis on Thursday, Gonzaga, all the players and coach Few said it, all the right things. They took ownership of the defensive issues, especially after Saturday. You heard players and Few talking about playing with more heart, being more assignment sound. Ryan Nemhard mentioned after Oregon State, we know the scouting report. This guy wants to go right. We let him go right. We know what they wanted to do, and we let him do it. It's like fundamentals things that they've got to address. Now, the one thing I think stuck out of Saturday's post game, and this you can take all the way back to USC. I remember Ryan Nemhard saying, because USC had those guards, those big physical guards,
Yep.
6'4", 6'6" guys. You got to guard your yard, which is, and you touched on it earlier in the show here, that you have to be able to deal with the guy in front of you. It's you got to be able to do all the other things, help and have a guy pinching or gapping or whatever to make that easier. But you have to be able to guard one-on-one, and that's been an issue. That's been a real issue here the last few games, and going back to USC at the outset. I thought it had gotten a lot better in between, but maybe Pepperdine, you started to see the cracks there with Mo Odom and Olvera, another 6'5" kid that lit them up. San Diego had a big half against the Zags. I think they scored 80 against GU.
Yep.
So that to me is priority number one. I'm guarding you. I'm going to make you uncomfortable. I'm going to stay in front of you. If you hit a shot over my contest, we'll deal with that. Now, teams aren't going to let you do that. They're going to screen you and they're going to do all the things. But that's job one. What do you think the kind of the priority defensively is for the Zags to start with to fix all the problems they're having?
Well, I mean, it's executing what they're trying to do. They get lost in the wash. They've been getting lost in the wash a lot. This last week, and not real intricate action, and things that for sure have been scouted, right? Hey, this is how they do the dribble handoff. When so and so comes up and sets a ball screen, he's going to pop. He's whatever it might be. I mean, I think they just have to lock in what they want to do defensively with their actions, how they want to switch. I mean, they get. I remember a distinct play where against Oregon State, I believe it was, where Ike's guy is moving, to the weak side of the floor, the opposite end of to the 3-point line, and instead of going out with him, he just points at Greg. You can't hear what he says. Greg's guy screens him, and they give up a 3 in the corner. I mean, that's just very basic communication. And I don't know if that's Graham trying to take a shortcut and not go out there, or if that they're supposed to switch that, and that's Ben not seeing what's happening around him. But I know that I can see that and know that that's a mistake. You see that a lot with the guards too, where they'll get confused on a switch, or the rotations on the weak side. Against WSU, there was a possession where Hickman's in no man's land, and I think Brian gets a good look in the corner and makes it. So he's late. I mean, in live it looks like he gets there, but then you see it, and by the time Brian's lifted and starts getting into his shot, Hickman's 2 steps away.
Yeah.
And so to me, you got to start there. You've got to start with, we can't. When you're playing good basketball teams and good players, those mistakes are brutal. And now you're trying to get lucky. You're hoping they just miss. So that's where I would start. It just feels like they have a lot of breakdowns defensively that are schematic. And certainly this staff's coaching them to do the right thing. But for whatever reason, they're having these breakdowns. And then to your point, you've got to keep the guy in front of you. I mean, there's the dribble penetration. I don't care if it's Odom, who's 6 foot, or if it's Ball, who's 6'7". They can't keep the ball in front, and that's a problem. It's much more difficult to guard dribble penetration that gets to the paint than it is to guard a post.
Yeah.
Right? The post player is somewhat static. it's almost the ball gets into the post player, and everything kind of stops for a second, and you kind of know where you are, and then you know how to go double, whether it be from the top side, low side, whatever it is. But when you're scrambling to keep up with the driver, it's very difficult to play defense when you're always behind the play. And they have to get better at just keeping the guy in front.
Yeah.
So two things can be true, and I
Yeah.
think it's both of those things.
No, it seems like to me when I'm watching them, the first time of a possession when somebody gets an advantage, whether it's off a ball screen or they just get beat off the bounce, the rest of the possession, whether the guy goes to the rim and scores, the posts don't help, whether he drives and kicks, whether whether they, even if say they dump it into a big man and the Zags might sag, whatever, then it's boom, 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 pass around.
Yeah.
They're always chasing after the very first sign of a breakdown, whether it's, the ball screen coverage wasn't right or just this guy took me to the rim or took me to the paint. They're always, that you can see them just trying to fire out and recover. And with smaller guards, 6'1", 6'2" guards, trying to contest bigger wings, unless you're on top of them, it's not going to make much difference. But a lot of chase mode is what I've seen.
Yeah, I agree.
And as you said too, that and take what's on that scouting report, take it into the game. If the guy's going right hand, teams know Caleb Battle is mostly right hand. You're seeing that they're forcing him into tough shots and tough finishes. Same thing with the Zags. They know tendencies of the other team. They got to stick with them. But one other thing defensively, and then we'll get out of here. We should point out WCC Players of the Week last week. Michael Ratai, who went for 29 against the Zags, a career high, and Tyree Bryan, who went for 35 against the Zags, career high. Co-Players of the Week this week. So Zags still 0 for whatever it is, 12 on the WCC Players of the Week, but this week they didn't really have a case for that. One other thing.
By the way, Gonzaga did fall out of the top 25.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. So go ahead. What was the point you wanted to make?
Well, I was just going to say one last thing defensively, and I just thought that game the other day maybe seemed like a time to try Emmanuel Innocente, especially with Ball or with Bryan. The way they were playing size-wise, he would have matched up pretty well. He is a defensive stopper. He played a couple minutes against Oregon State, but I think right after he checked in, they ran a screen that picked him off, elbow extended. Ball went to the corner, and that Nate Kings, another guy who torched the Zags in the first half, hits a jumper, wide open jumper. Any surprise that they didn't give him at least a couple minute run on those two guys that were going off and try to slow him down, or was it just a matter of, hey, we got to score and keep up at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
We're losing ground here. Yeah.
I think the question is, why isn't he playing 12 minutes a game? And I've said this from the beginning of the year. If he's good enough defensively where you put him into critical moments in these tight games, he's showing you something in practice where he's a problem. Like, he is good enough to be there when it's winning time and we need to stop. And I think I would try to develop him a little bit and see what he can, because when he's played in some of these, kind of garbage time minutes, he looks comfortable with the ball. He knows what they're trying to run. Certainly, Emmanuel doesn't have a track record of being a high level shooter, but you've got scoring.
Shot it pretty well.
I agree. It was small sample size this year, but you've got enough scoring around you where I don't know, and so much of what you're doing is pick and roll anyway. I would give him a look. He's enormous. I mean, when he's on I want to say it was WSU, but that was calling a game, and he's on the floor with Battle. I mean, Battle's all of 6'5", and Battle's pretty put together.
Yeah.
Battle looked small. I
Yeah.
mean, Emmanuel is just stout, and he's got clearly good instincts defensively. I'll be really interested, given the frustrations this last week defensively, and the fact that they're going to be playing in Portland against a team that they should handle pretty easily. Whether it be to send a message to somebody or to a collection of guys that we've got this other option, we're gonna investigate it, or because you think he can help you. I would want to see him play meaningful minutes in the first half where he's with their starters or with your main rotation, and just see what that looks like. Can you build him up a little bit where if Battle doesn't have it again, he's 20 minutes didn't score the other night. Dusty, and I don't have it, but his numbers shooting the ball the last 5 or 6 games are abysmal. I mean, and he missed a great look against Oregon State late. He missed a great look late against Santa Clara, and that's fine. You're going to miss shots, but his percentage is in the 20s. And as much as I like Dusty defensively, you've got all these issues on that end of the floor. I would give him a look. So I was surprised, but I think the point you make about trying to keep up is a reason, justifies why you didn't play him against Santa Clara. But moving forward, I don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I just don't know why you wouldn't give him a look.
Yeah.
And I'll be very interested to see if they do that.
Now that and other things, there are going to be tweaks or changes made, because, I mean, that's 3 straight teams that have shot 53% or better against Gonzaga. That has not happened in the Few era. That's the only 3 teams this year that have shot over 47% against the Zags. So there's going to be some maybe subtle, some more pronounced. When that fivesome that got them back in the game at the end did what they did and just played so hard. I mean, they were flying around. It was they were active. Even Mark after that said, "Hey, all options are on the table." And I think there is kind of we're going back to the starting line, to the reset, and we're going to take it from there. Who jumps out at practice, who shows they want to play, with all the effort and energy and intelligence, that scouting report that is required. I think you're going to see some noticeable and maybe subtle changes from here on out, because the way it's gone, that's what's required. Well, that's going to do it. Appreciate Christy Burns, as always, for putting this all together. I'll post this on spokesman.com, our website. It'll be on YouTube. It's on Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you listen to your pods, you can find us. Just punch in Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. Have a good week, everybody. We'll be back next Monday to recap Portland and a look ahead. Thanks for joining us.